Welcome back, everyone. Today we're diving deep, really deep, into Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn's The Gulag Archipelago.
A chilling read.
Absolutely. It's about the Soviet forced labor camp system. A really dark chapter of history. We're going to look at it from two angles. Solzhenitsyn's own experience, of course, and then, well, how a modern-day libertarian or conservative, might view it all.
A perspective that I think brings some really important insights to the table.
Yeah, for sure. And a fair warning to our listeners, what we're about to uncover, it's not just like something in the past, it's a real warning,
Historic warning, especially for those who, value individual liberty. Solzhenitsyn's work, it's not just, a history book. It's an indictment of totalitarian power and the human cost when the state has too much control.
Absolutely. And the scale of the Gulag system, it's hard to even grasp. The thing that really got me was how Solzhenitsyn structures the book around these waves of repression.
Yeah.
It wasn't random, right? It was targeted, deliberate.
Exactly. Each wave sweeping up different groups, anyone considered, an enemy of the state. What's both fascinating and terrifying is how they expanded over time. Eventually, even people seemingly loyal to the regime, they weren't safe.
Yeah, like the old Russian engineers. Think about it. These were the people who built the country, the infrastructure, the backbone of Russian industry. And they were targeted, destroyed.
It seems counterintuitive, right, to cripple your own society like that.
Totally.
But from the totalitarian perspective, it makes a chilling kind of sense. These engineers represented a way of thinking, a connection to the past, the pre-revolution past, that the Soviets wanted to wipe out completely.
So it wasn't about their skills or contributions. It was about ideological purity.
Exactly. They were a threat just by existing.
And it wasn't just engineers. Religious believers persecuted relentlessly. The night of struggle against religion in Leningrad, religious intellectuals gone, just vanished.
Religion, any religion really, it challenged the power of the state, offered an alternative, a moral compass outside the party. That was unacceptable. In a totalitarian system, they want to control everything, every aspect of life.
So anyone, really, who held beliefs or had skills, anything that went against the party line, they were a target. It's like constant fear. Anyone could be next.
That was the whole point. It wasn't just about eliminating enemies. It was about control through fear, paralyzing society. So any thought of dissent, was crushed before it could even form. Even loyal party members could be targeted.
Right. If they weren't safe, no one was.
Exactly.
It makes you realize this system, it wasn't about punishing actions. It was about preemptively eliminating any potential threat, even if that threat was only in their minds.
A terrifying prospect.
It wasn't justice. It was control through terror, pure and simple. We've talked about how the Gulag, targeted these groups, but the individual experience of arrest, that was something else. So Solzhenitsyn, he describes it all in such detail. It's chilling, the way the NKVD, manipulated people psychologically.
The NKVD, the Soviet secret police, they had it down to a system. Break you down mentally even before you got to the interrogation.
It's like the arrest itself was orchestrated to maximize fear, disorient you.
Absolutely.
So Solzhenitsyn talks about how they would deliberately arrest people when they were away from, their normal surroundings, snatch them off the street, or even worse, lure them with false promises.
Right.
Like that story you mentioned about the man arrested with the fake vacation ticket.
Oh, yeah. That's a perfect example of their tactics. Imagine thinking you're going to Sochi for a vacation and boom, you're in the Gulag. It wasn't about efficiency, you see. It was about taking away your reality, your sense of what's real.
Yeah, like a psychological free fall. You wouldn't even know which way was up.
Right.
And it wasn't just, the physical stuff. Solzhenitsyn points out how they used language, deliberately misleading language to cover up what was really happening.
Absolutely. Euphemisms, things like corrective labor colonies. I mean, come on. It's classic Orwellian stuff. Control language, control thought. And this went hand in hand with taking away legal protections. And that started early on in the Soviet regime.
Yeah. You mentioned those early decrees that gave the NKVD's predecessor, almost unlimited power. It's like they were setting up a system from the very beginning to operate above the law.
Exactly. Confiscations, compulsion, and arrests. They could do it all. No oversight, no accountability. And then you have Lenin himself talking about purging society of harmful insects. I mean, where do you even begin with that?
Harmful insects. Dehumanizing, really. It's scary how easy it is to use language like that to justify, horrific acts. So how did that kind of talk actually translate into policy?
Oh, it wasn't just talk. Lenin's words, they set the stage. Anyone the state didn't like, they were a target. Harmful insects, that can mean anyone. Aristocrats, intellectuals who disagreed, you name it. And it created this atmosphere, fear and suspicion everywhere. Any little deviation from the ideology, and it could be curtains for you.
So the arrest, that was just like the first step in this terrifying ordeal.
Okay.
Solzhenitsyn, he takes us through the interrogation process and the techniques they use. I mean, it was all designed to break people, even the strongest people. Sleep deprivation seems like it was like standard practice.
Yeah. Brutally effective. Deprive someone of sleep for days, weeks even, and they start to lose it. Delirium. Easy to coerce, to force a confession. They lose their grip on reality. Can't think straight, can't defend themselves.
And it wasn't just, physical deprivation. Solzhenitsyn talks about how they'd exploit your fears, the things you love, threaten your family, your kids.
Hit you where it hurts. They knew, for a lot of people, the thought of their loved ones suffering, that was worse than anything they could do to you directly.
It's just twisted. How a totalitarian regime, they can weaponize human emotions like that. The good things about us turned against us.
Exactly.
And if that wasn't enough, there was this conveyor belt system. Interrogators, one after the other. Different methods until you broke.
Designed to wear you down, chip away at you, your sense of self, your hope, make you believe there's no justice. Psychological torture on a massive scale.
And the crazy thing is, all this is happening in a system that's supposedly based on law and justice. They had laws on paper. But in reality, those laws, they meant nothing.
The Soviet legal system, it wasn't about justice. It was a tool to give this illusion of legality while they do whatever they wanted. Even someone like Abakumov, the Minister of State Security, he was arrested, executed by the very system he helped create. I mean, that tells you something.
Yeah, and he was involved in torture, oversaw the whole thing, and he still became a victim.
Abakumov, his story, it shows you, in a totalitarian regime, no one is safe. Not even the people at the top. The system, it consumes everyone. It creates this fear that permeates everything.
Absolute power corrupts, absolutely. And that corruption, it wasn't just in individuals. It was built into the system itself. I mean, if the people in power weren't immune, what hope did anyone else have? We've talked about the manipulation, the horrors of interrogation, but it didn't end there. The Gulag itself, Solzhenitsyn, he takes us inside. And the dehumanization, it was systematic. They weren't even called by their names. Just Zeks.
It was deliberate. Take away your individuality. Make you just another cog in the machine. Zek, short for Zaklucheny, the Russian word for prisoner. It became a label. Erased your past, your identity, your humanity.
And even the journey to the camps. Those prisoner transport cars, the Stolypin cars. Brutal.
Oh, yeah.
Solzhenitsyn describes them packed like sardines. Hardly any food, water, or sanitation. It sounds like a nightmare.
Those journeys, they could last weeks, months even, often just as deadly as the camps themselves. Disease everywhere. The conditions, they were designed to break you before you even got there.
Like a preemptive punishment.
Yeah, like you weren't even human anymore, not worthy of dignity or compassion.
And when they got to the camps, it was brutal. Just to survive, you had to navigate this whole social hierarchy. Solzhenitsyn talks about the criminal underworld, the Blatny. They often controlled things, exploited the weaker prisoners.
The Gulag, it wasn't just forced labor. It was like a mini Soviet society. Violence, corruption, no rule of law. The Blatny, a lot of them were hardened criminals. The guards used them to control the political prisoners. You were constantly under threat, not just from the guards, but from each other.
I remember this one story. The prisoners, they were given these reduced bread rations and then forced to trade their belongings to the guards for food.
It was all about control, keep them hungry, on the edge. Basic necessities become currency. You could manipulate, exploit, and it broke down solidarity. You were pitted against each other just to survive.
But even with all this, Solzhenitsyn's book, it shows the resilience of the human spirit. There are stories of incredible courage, defiance, like the Scientific and Technical Society, formed by prisoners in Cell 75. They kept their intellectual curiosity, their thirst for knowledge, in the midst of all that suffering.
It's amazing, isn't it, how humans can find meaning, purpose, even in the worst situations. It's that indomitable spirit, the desire for knowledge, for connection, for something more than just the brutal reality.
Yeah. And Solzhenitsyn, he talks about the importance of stories, sharing stories, reciting poetry, acts of kindness. They weren't just distractions. They were lifelines.
Absolutely. That cultural resistance, it was crucial to hold on to yourself, your dignity, your hope, in a system that was designed to crush all of that.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the Gulag Archipelago, what are the key takeaways, especially for, libertarians, conservatives?
Solzhenitsyn's work, it's a warning. Unchecked state power, the dangers of collectivism, the importance of individual liberty. The Gulag, it was a result of a system that put the state above everything, above the individual, sacrificed freedom for these utopian dreams.
And it's a warning for us today, too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Authoritarianism on the rise, individual rights being eroded, these ideologies that promise security, equality, but at what cost? Freedom. We have to be vigilant, remember the lessons of history, recognize the signs of tyranny, even when they're subtle. The Gulag, it might be in the past, but the things that caused it, those forces, they're still out there.
It's a scary thought,
Mm-hmm.
but we have to face it. Millions suffered, perished in the Gulag. We owe it to them to learn to make sure it never happens again. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into one of the darkest chapters in human history.
It's been, well, sobering, but necessary. Let's hope we never forget what we've learned.